We'll start the conversation here, though, Alex. I think what has spearheaded a lot of the talk this week about the Patriots offensive coaching staff was Mike Reiss over the weekend in his notes column saying that he is hearing from league personnel that the Patriots and Bill Belichick could move Matt Patricia over to offense. So the Patriots, in Reiss's intel, would have a former defensive coordinator and a former special teams coordinator running their offense. It's getting to the point where if all of these things are actually true, and this is where the Patriots are headed with Patricia and Joe Judge and Nick Caley and Troy Brown kind of running this ship offensively, it's getting harder and harder not to press the panic button on this being the direction of the team right now.
Yeah, so my colleague Scott Zolak at 98.5 laid this out today of what the coaching staff could look like. Excuse me. Nick Caley as being promoted from tight ends coach to quarterbacks coach and passing game coordinator. Joe Judge is the tight ends coach, co-running game coordinator. Matt Patricia is also a co-running game coordinator. He'd be the offensive line coach. And then you have Troy Brown coaching wide receivers. I just will throw out Matt Patricia's first jobs, plural, in New England. He was an offensive assistant in 2004 and then the assistant offensive line coach in 2005 before becoming the linebackers coach in 2006. So it's not like he's never coached offense, right?
It's just been two decades.
Yeah, I texted you about this yesterday, and if anybody in the chat has it, I really couldn't. I wasn't going to dedicate hours to searching. I probably could have tried harder, but I couldn't find it in my searching. Has a coach ever been both an offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, like defined at different parts in their career? I'm not talking about a head coach who called offense and defense. I'm talking about a coach who was titled offensive coordinator and then titled defensive coordinator in two separate stints. And that sounds alarming. Look, I think that it would be interesting. I think there's some unique advantages in that in terms of self-scouting point of view. A defensive coordinator is going to know better than a lifelong offensive coach what the other defensive coordinator is thinking. That's why the Patriots rotate their staff around so much. Josh McDaniels started on defense, right? Before he coached offense. That being said, like fully dedicated, I don't know how that would work. But if anybody's going to try that, if it hasn't happened before, and again, maybe it has, I couldn't find it, but feel free to correct me. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If anybody's going to try it, I would think it would be Bill.
Yeah, it's funny because you always fall back on, this is Bill freaking Belichick we're talking about, right? Bill is such a proven commodity, is even selling it short. I don't even know what other word to use besides just the greatest of all time, that you think everything that he does is probably going to find a way of working itself out. But at the same time, I think what concerns me the most about this approach is that you got a lot, again, same as with the defensive side of the ball in some ways, you have a lot of cooks in the kitchen, right? Who's the guy that's actually running the ship offensively? Because if it's Matt Patricia's the O-line coach / run game coordinator and Nick Caley's the quarterbacks coach / pass game coordinator, and maybe Caley's the one that's actually calling the plays, and Joe Judge is in there too, overseeing everything and coaching a position, coaching tight ends, coaching wide receivers, whatever the case may be. Who is actually in charge on the offensive side of the ball? And if you're the Patriots, the last thing that you want is Mac Jones to have a million different opinions thrown at him, right? You don't want the quarterback, especially in his second year, to be sitting there and saying, well, Joe Judge just told me this. Now Matt is telling me that, and Nick is calling this on game day. What am I thinking? Where are we? What are we doing? The lack of organization, I think, is more of a concern than maybe football brain power, if you will, right? Like, I think that those three guys have a lot of football experience and knowledge, but at the end of the day, you have to have one head chef. And right now it feels like on both sides of the ball, they got a bunch of sous chefs, but they have no idea who's actually in charge.
Yeah, at the end of the day, because you're going to have, and like you said, these guys are all great football minds. That means you're probably going to have varying opinions.
Right.
You need, and maybe it's Bill, but now Bill's wearing a lot of hats.
Right.
But you need somebody who at the end of the day is going to say definitively, this is what we're doing or this is what we're not doing.
Right.
And, you know, who is at the end of that chain? And is it, you know, kind of what's been reported on defense it was one guy during the week and then one guy on Sundays. I just don't think that that's a healthy way to operate.
Right.
And now you're looking at maybe that being the case on offense as well. So
I want to talk about Bill O'Brien too, because there's been a lot of theories floated out there. This one on paper, for Bill O'Brien's sake, if you believe what you want to believe about him in terms of his interest of coming back to the NFL, and the Patriots obviously have a gigantic need for Bill O'Brien to come back to the NFL, but yet here we sit on February 17th, and this is still not done. He's still not the offensive coordinator of the Patriots. And according to Nick Saban, Saban is under the impression that he's coming back to Alabama. And there's really no...
Nick Saban says a lot of things. Although, for what it's worth, Scott Zolak said today that he was very specific about how he said it. He doesn't believe Bill O'Brien will be the offensive coordinator for the Patriots.
Right.
He's sort of, I don't want to put words in his mouth. He sort of emphasized offensive coordinator. So I can't think of any other role he would come back in.
Me neither. Quarterbacks coach / associate head coach, maybe, or something like that, right?
Is associate head coach over
it
would be coordinator? Like, I don't know.
Right. I don't know either. From everything that I have gathered on Bill O'Brien, the impression that I get is that Bill Belichick has an unwritten rule that he doesn't like to poach coaches from other team staffs in general. And then you add onto that layer that it's poaching from his best friend in football, Nick Saban. And I think the number one thing here isn't money. It's not power or control of the roster. It's not that the Patriots don't want Bill O'Brien and Bill O'Brien doesn't want the Patriots. It's that Bill is not going to backstab Nick and take his offensive coordinator from him unless Nick Saban gives his sign of approval, and says to Bill O'Brien, go, right? You want to be in the NFL, you want to be with the Patriots, go. So until that happens, the Patriots are preparing for that not to happen, right? If in a couple weeks, in a month, Bill O'Brien and Nick Saban work something out and they're able to get over that hurdle, then the Patriots would welcome it with opening arms. But for now, they have to operate like it's not going to happen because there's no other options, right? There's really nothing else that they can do. But the Belichick-Saban connection has afforded a lot of really good things for the Patriots in the past, right? Like they have Mac Jones, partially because of that connection. They have Dante Hightower and Christian Barmore and Damian Harris and all these good players that have funneled from Alabama to the pro ranks with the Patriots, and not to mention all the coaching and schematic advantages that those two have mustered up together in the lab working together. But it's kind of an interesting conundrum and an interesting kind of contrast here, that it could be that relationship and the fact that they are best friends that is preventing Bill O'Brien from coming here and being the offensive coordinator for the Patriots.
Yeah, and that there's nothing you can do at that point, right? You got to wait, I guess, for his contract to run out or whatever. But I'll go back to
sign a 2-year contract. So his contract runs out after this season. So if he so chooses, once he's a free agent, essentially in the coaching world, I guess he could potentially come back next year to the Patriots instead of this year.
I would think, though, if Bryce Young wins another Heisman, and assuming he stays healthy, there's probably a pretty good chance that happens.
Yeah.
He's going to get some very, very lucrative head coaching offers in the college ranks.
Yeah.
So, if you really want Bill O'Brien to be the offensive coordinator of the Patriots, or at any point, you got to root hard against Alabama this year. I'll just throw that out there. But thank you. Somebody reiterated my point in the comments, and I think it's a good one. I'll just go back to it since we're having this conversation. At this point, outside of Bill O'Brien, I'm not too worried about the offensive coordinator. To me, somebody, whether it's Judge or Kaylee, and those feel like the two leaders in the clubhouse. I mean, maybe Matt Patricia. Somebody's going to call the plays at this point. Somebody's going to call the plays. And again, outside of O'Brien, I don't think the offense is going to change. I don't think naming or bringing in an offensive coordinator changes much at this point. To me, the biggest question, staffing-wise, the Patriots have to answer right now, or not right now, but in the coming weeks, is a dedicated quarterbacks coach.
Yeah.
And I think Nick Caley's a good football mind, but somebody who's done it before. Right. Somebody who knows what they're doing. You can't play, and not Adam Gase. You can't play games with, I have to throw that disclaimer on there because it's true. Yeah. You can't play games with Mac Jones' development. You just can't do it. You just cannot do it, or we're going to be sitting here in November talking about Phil Dracovic. So I like Mac. I do, but it's the nature versus nurture thing with
Right.
all these quarterbacks. And we saw it plain as day this year more than any other year. Trevor Lawrence is better than what we saw in Jacksonville, but the coaching staff around him was a mess. Mac, good player, but he had a good support staff. That helps too. So I think getting somebody to work one-on-one with Mac Jones, and I've seen people say, bringing Hoyer back as the backup quarterback, maybe that's part of it, and that certainly would help. But they need somebody working with Mac Jones, dedicated on working with Mac Jones.
Yeah, so there you have it. That's kind of resetting the table about the Patriots' latest on the offensive coaching staff. I heard those, I guess we can call them reports from Zolak. I know he always likes to throw things out there that his little birdies are telling him. I don't know what he wants us to call them, but we can call them reports about Bill O'Brien potentially being out. I wanted to bring up the Nick Saban, Bill Belichick thing because I think ultimately that's what's the biggest roadblock right now. And Bill O'Brien coming back to the Patriots has nothing to do with Bill O'Brien's lack of interest or the Patriots' lack of interest in Bill O'Brien, but more to do with the just coaching. I don't even know what the word is, just connections, right? And friendships and relationships.